I was part of the original team who came here a few thousand years ago. At that time, I was just a PA, sort of secretary to one of the main people, to try to get you people to shape up. You know, we taught you agricultural techniques, how to make metals out of ores, and basically how to achieve high civilization. We helped you build those pyramids. And so we, in the Sirius Daily News, for which I contribute Earth letters, we have an Earth news section at the back. Not many of us read it, but there are a few of us who are still interested in the Earth. And so we have, I'm here on assignment. We have people here as observers monitoring what you're all getting up to. And I must say that there has been a terrific buzz back at Sirius about what's going on in Liverpool at the moment. Because, you see, they know about you. They know that your motto is find the others. And I'll drop the pretense now of being from Sirius. I'll tell you that my pseudonym is Robert Temple, and if you believe that, you believe anything. And so back in the 70s, things were different. And I really had to come here for this wonderful event. The first thing I want to do is really say how fantastic the production was last night. Once again, no wonder that Daisy Campbell is the secret ruler of the universe, because she pulled it off last night like nobody else could have done. I think that the production of Cosmic Trigger was just a wonderful and heartwarming experience, but of course it also had its touches of tragedy. One of the things that has stuck in my mind the most about Robert Anton Wilson's book is the incredibly sad story of what happened to his daughter Luna. And you know, I hadn't read Cosmic Trigger since Wilson sent it to me when it came out. Until about a month ago, I reread the whole thing. And I was more impressed with it now than I was at the time, because I understand so much more now. He was really ahead of his time, Robert Anton Wilson, and several of his friends. I have to confess that I'm a bit of a slow learner, and a lot of the things that he was talking about hadn't really got through to me at the time when he brought that book out. And I was a bit put off, as I in fact still am, by the Aleister Crowley connection, because I don't like Crowley. I don't go for that sort of thing. But I do go for a great deal of what Robert Anton Wilson and his friend Timothy Leary stood for. I want to clarify the matter of drugs, because you see, Timothy Leary in the public mind is connected with what's called the drug culture. And he was deeply involved in drugs, as everybody knows. And Robert Anton Wilson took part in all that too. But they both came to realize, and it's very explicitly stated in this book, Cosmic Trigger, that you have to move beyond what they call the hedonic stage of drug taking. I want to read you a sentence from Cosmic Trigger, which expresses what Wilson and Leary thought about this. I just have to find that page, which is, well, I can't find that page, but the thing is that they said that, to recall their exact words as best I can, it's an adolescent immaturity of those who never get beyond the pleasure-seeking aspects of drug taking, what they called hedonic because of hedonism. They themselves had moved through that stage. And you probably remember from the play last night, if you haven't read the book, that Leary had defined what he called the 8 stages of activation of the human nervous system. The first four being what he called physical, that to do with the functioning of the body, and the second four more mental and spiritual, getting beyond that. The fifth stage was what they called the hedonic stage, where they attempted to do mind expansion through a very careful and controlled use of drugs. And then it's essential to move beyond that to the sixth, seventh, and eighth stages, and I won't go into all the details of what they are because you can read about those. But the great danger was that people attempting to go beyond the physical into the spiritual could get stuck in this fifth stage, the hedonic stage. And that's when people do uncontrolled uses of drugs, and when they become addicted to certain drugs, and when they just think, well, I'll just stick with that, and I won't move beyond it. And this is one of the central messages of both Wilson and Leary, which I fear that not everyone has grasped, because those who are going to attempt mind expansion with those substances have to get beyond the good vibes and good feelings that they get from it, because it's not about pleasure, it's about moving on and up. Now, I mentioned Luna. It's an incredibly sad story about her early death and how it came about. And I was looking through the book again where Wilson records the conversations he had with this amazing daughter of his. She started doing watercolors, and he said to her, what are all these about, Luna? I mean, they're beautiful, but what's the idea? And she said, I'm trying to paint the clear light. This brings us back to what my good friend Greg Sams was saying in the previous talk about the nature of the light. And this, again, brings us back to moving beyond the hedonic stage into the higher regions, which are based on the light, as Greg was discussing a moment ago. And this was very clear to Wilson and Leary, and I wouldn't want anybody to think that the only thing that Robert Anton Wilson was trying to tell us all to do would be to have a lot of fun and make a lot of jokes and be discordant, because the thing is that there was a very deep and profound purpose behind all the jokes and behind all the fun, and I'm sure you know that, but I want to drive it home a bit more, because he really had seen the importance of moving towards the light, and he had to go through this terrible experience of losing this child of the light, because his daughter appeared to be that kind of person who was trying to bring the light, and he had to go through the terrible pain of losing her. But I do have here a passage where she says what she thinks, because you see, before she was murdered, she was previously beaten up by a gang of black boys who robbed her. And returning home from school one afternoon, Luna was beaten and robbed by a gang of black kids. She was weeping and badly frightened when she arrived home, and her father, that's him, was shaken by the unfairness of it happening to her, such a gentle, ethereal child. And then he says that Luna said that it was not because that they were bad. The karma is a blind machine. The effects of evil go on, but they don't necessarily come back on those who start the evil. And this is her reaction to what happened to her. The next day, Luna was her usual sunny and cheerful self, just like the light in her paintings. I'm glad you're feeling better, he said. I stopped the wheel of karma, she said. All the bad energy is with the kids who beat me up. I'm not holding any of it. And she wasn't. The bad energy had entirely passed by, and there was no anger or fear in her. I never saw her show any hostility to blacks after the beating, any more than before. And then she says, the only way to stop the wheel is to stop it inside yourself by giving up bad energy and concentrating on the positive. And this is, of course, not easy. Now, talk about somebody wise beyond her years. This was her reaction. And then, of course, as you saw last night in the play, at the very end, when Anton Wilson is in a bad way on a Zimmer frame, and he's saying his last words, he says, "I forgive the man who murdered my daughter. I love him." If it is the power of love that has the possibility to pull us out of the terrible mess we're in. And the power of love and the struggle for the light are the key to everything. And this was what Wilson and Leary wanted you to know. All the other stuff is a lot of fun, but it's steps on the way to their deeper message. Now, I want to give you a few chronological details as to how I came to be involved in this in a small way. It makes me very sad to think that all the main players of the Cosmic Trigger story have died. And I seem to be kind of last man standing in a way. It's true, as Johnny said when he introduced me, that Cosmic Trigger was a phrase that I used in my book, The Sirius Mystery, and which Wilson liked and used for his title. And when he sent me the book, I got this strange parcel from San Francisco from a man I'd never heard of. He wrote me a 35-page letter explaining himself, and I hope, I still have it somewhere, I hope to find that and maybe publish it, because it was a very revealing letter, just pouring out his feelings and his thoughts. And I promise you that I will do my best to find it and put it online sometime. I was deeply touched by all of that. I never met him. He only came to England very briefly for the Illuminatus, which I never saw, and I never met Shea either, and I never met King Campbell. So I'm sort of very much on the fringe. But on the other hand, I seem to be built into the thing in some strange way. So I feel that like I need to be here to testify for the guilty parties, because I just don't want us ever to forget them and what they stood for. The 70s, which produced their work and produced my Sirius mystery, which started so many balls rolling, were a time when we all had enough freedom to do these things. Have you noticed that everything's closing in on us? That we've got more CCTV cameras in Britain than any other country in the world, that every email is read, every text message is read, all our phone calls are recorded. I mean, what is all this? And of course, I don't need to tell anybody in this room that we are all in agreement here that this is really bad. And so how do we fight it? Well, we can't, because you may have noticed that most of the positions of authority on this planet are held by psychopaths. I didn't say that in order to be funny, because I really meant it. And you know that. A lot of the politicians, if they weren't before they came into office, soon became psychopathic. You only have to read the kiss and tell memoirs of the girlfriend of Francois Hollande, where she said that the day he became president, he changed completely. He became a stranger. And this is what happens. Everybody knows the maxim, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. But it's true. And even people who aren't crazy when they are running for office, as soon as they get into office, they become crazy very fast. Because the human beings are not built for power. You know, it's very hard to withstand power. If somebody handed any of you power and said, okay, you can be president of the United States, or you can be, I won't say president of the European Commission, that's too awful. How could you cope with it? Could you resist the temptations? Just think about, you have to be real Superman to be able to withstand all that. So maybe this is why the computers want to take over. But the only way we can stop the world becoming an intolerable place where we are literally enslaved and microchipped and become just ciphers in a world run by a psychopathic power elite, which is what they are. the Westminster bubble being just one of the many bubbles, but they don't know anything about us and they don't care. They just want us to pay taxes and shut the fuck up. Well, the only way we can fight it is to struggle for the light and to try to love everybody. Just completely suffocate them with love and tell them that they may be psychopaths who are incapable of feelings, that they don't know what love is, they cannot feel anything because they are dead inside completely. They have no power of empathy or compassion. They don't care how many people they kill, because what does life mean to them? Because they don't possess life. We do. And we ought to give it to them. We ought to offer to go love bomb them. Why don't we have a love bomb march in London to Parliament and say, okay, we're all wearing hearts on our sleeves, and we're going to come here and show you that we're going to love you to death. Does anybody want to ask anything? There may be a lot of questions bubbling away. But first, I'll just tell you a couple of details. Illuminatus was written between 69 and 71 and published in 73. I had nothing to do with that at all. And what happened was, as you saw briefly in the play last night, they were getting all enthusiastic about Sirius after Illuminatus, and by one of those serendipitous coincidences, and I don't believe in coincidences any more than you do, my book, The Sirius Mystery, came out in 76. That was the first edition. For those of you who are interested in that book, I have to emphasize that I revised it in 1998 and added 50% more material. So anybody who's thinking of reading it should get that later edition. It came to the hands of Wilson, and he wrongly assumed, by the way, that I was an astronomer, a practicing astronomer, which I am not and never have been, because I'm a fellow of the Royal Astronomical Society. And you don't have to be an astronomer for that. You have to be recommended by astronomers who propose you. And so it's a pity that he thought that I was an astronomer, and I hope nobody thinks that I've ever pretended to be one. He got inspired by my own researches, and that came into this. And I do believe that there is a connection between Sirius and our sun. In fact, now you ought to listen to this. I'm just going to tell you one scientific thing. Don't worry, I'm not going to tell you any more than one. There's the ancient philosophers, Macrobius, Proclus, Gaudentius, Chalcidius, and some of the others, said in their writings, which survive, that there's something called the sacred fraction. And I came across this quite late, that the sacred fraction is the number 256 over the number 243. Well, when I read this for the first time, those numbers meant nothing to me. And I thought, well, I'm going to divide it out and see what's the decimal, because I might recognize that. And that was 1.053, which meant nothing to me either. I had never come across that. Well, eventually, using my instinct, I thought, this is going to have to be something to do with Sirius, I reckon. And so I got the book Astrophysical Data, which is a standard textbook for astrophysicists, to look up things like the different sizes of all the bodies and the different brightnesses and things of everything that's in the sky. And so I discovered that the mass of Sirius B, the small invisible star that goes around Sirius, is 1.053 times the mass of our sun. And I just think that that is really too much for a coincidence. One of the people who mentioned that number was Proclus, and I have a long appendix in my book, The Sirius Mystery, about Proclus, because he knew about invisible stars in space and said so in his commentary on Plato's Timaeus. So I suggested, long before I discovered the sacred fraction thing, that Proclus knew about the Sirius Mystery. And so I think that this number may be another number that has come down through time, along with all the other ones which I discuss in that book of mine. And so I have been led to the possible conclusion, and I also don't believe in believing. I mean, I agree with the wonderful slide that was shown earlier, where Anton Wilson is quoted as saying, "Don't believe, hold all your beliefs tentatively, because if you don't, you'll stop thinking." But my tentative belief is that the Sirius and the solar system that we're in are part of a cell in our galaxy. You could think of it like a giant electromagnetic blob, if you like, that's got various stars in it, and that it's like a cell of the galaxy. Now, I believe that the things that we've been discovering in physics in recent years may apply to it. That is, when you get a cell, you get something called long-range order that can suddenly occur, whereby the speed of light might no longer apply to transmission, for instance. You get this long-range order, and it can be very extreme. In a very simple example of something called Baynard cells, which are things that form in a certain chemical when you put them on the stove, which is a liquid, you get thermal convection, and you get these cells on the top. And the chemists who've analyzed all this have said that when it reaches a certain threshold, you get this long-range order appearing, whereby the molecules, which had been completely random before, suddenly experience a 10 million-fold increase in order. And that's just some liquid sitting on a stove. Take those kind of numbers and apply them to a cell in space, and you might have instant telepathic communication possible between Sirius and our system. And I'm not going to lecture to you about the Sirius mystery, because that would be a different subject for a different time. But essentially, I discovered information preserved by an African tribe in Mali called the Dogon, and it's very precise and numerical information about the orbit of one of the Sirius system stars going around another, and then a third one which was later confirmed in the 1980s by astrophysicists after my book had appeared. And the Dogon maintained that there are 4 stars in the Sirius system and 2 planets, one of which is inhabited. And so they say that there are beings who live on that inhabited planet, and that they've been here in the past, not to Africa, because the Dogon admit that they migrated from somewhere else, and that it was their ancestors who met those beings who didn't look quite like us. And so, assuming that there is intelligent life on a planet there, and we have semi-intelligent life here, don't we? That we could be in instant contact with them without having to wait the 8.6 years for light to travel between our star systems, because if we're in a galactic cell, then long-range order would have set in, and you would have the possibility of instantaneous telepathic communication, although not physical communication. So that's my thought for the evening. And now, would anybody like to ask anything while I'm here?
I hadn't realised that the phrase cosmic trigger is actually borrowed from your book. So in the context of your book, what does it actually mean, cosmic trigger?
Well, that's a good question, and probably for this particular meeting, the best question, because what I suggested in the Sirius mystery was that there would probably be a system of ethics in the galaxy whereby, well, and in the other galaxies, whereby civilizations who are more advanced are very careful about contacting civilizations who are less advanced, as we've seen on our own planet what we've done as Westerners with Aboriginal inhabitants of countless places. And that there might be a kind of code that said they can't really contact us again until we discover that they exist, and then we won't be demoralized in the future because we'll be able to say, well, we might not be as advanced as you, but at least we figured out that you were there, ha ha. And that by doing by revealing this information in my book, perhaps I had somehow pressed a cosmic trigger. And this was what took Robert Anton Wilson's fancy, and that's the context. Somebody? Yes, you. Don't be shy.
Seems to me that the culture that we live in is one where we don't expect to get something for nothing. There's a deep sort of skepticism and cynicism when an offer like that is presented. And for this, and perhaps various other reasons, that expectation of reciprocity, expressions of love that are just sort of sent out there are often sort of treated with mistrust. But when the street down in Liverpool started hugging everyone, I think sooner or later, I meet someone who is very resilient to that. So I guess my question is, how do we bring that message of love in a way that isn't either ridiculed in the way that, for instance, the whole peace and love thing of the hippies has really become a sort of slogan for what in popular culture is kind of considered like hippie woolly thinking. How do we bring that and make it mainstream without it intimidating people?
Well, that's a very profound question, and so many people are full of self-hatred and self-loathing that they can't receive love or accept it. That's because they are not living up to their full potential, and they've made too many compromises and dirtied themselves by doing bad things. And deep down inside, they know that they have lost their self-respect. So why should anybody else respect them? And especially, why should anybody or could anybody love them? Because they're so deeply flawed. So you're absolutely right. And this is an extremely important question. You're right to say that the hippies have been discredited and love and peace and all of that has just become meaningless phrases which are discredited because look at the violent world. I'm not saying it's easy to do this or to get anybody to really accept the fact that they should open their hearts when their hearts are very, very firmly closed with locks and keys. I don't know. We've got to try just with anybody you know who needs opening up. We're limited in what we can do as individuals. We might know 2 or 3 people intimately, or we might know 10, or if we're very gregarious. But the thing is that what we can show in our small ways, each one of us, with just people that we know well, to help them come to terms with themselves, help them open up. I would say that some of the noblest people on earth are mothers who have brought up their children well. Their effect on the world may be limited to 1 or 2 or 3 children, and they may think, well, I haven't done much in my life. All I've done is raise my kids. But raising kids is not easy, and the whole basic principle should be that we're born. Let's try to make the world a little bit better place than it was before we came, so that when we die, we've left a slight improvement behind. It may only be that we've helped one person. If you only help one person, you've made a world a better place than before you came, and you've made your life worthwhile.
It's not really a question, it's an information. Love your enemy is such a difficult thing to do.
Yes.
Are you familiar with the Burroughs text?
The which?
The William Burroughs text of Love Your Enemy. It's kind of a sneering attack on the Sermon on the Mount. But
No, I'm not familiar with it.
It's fantastic, actually. It's amazing. It might happen. Is all I'm saying. I'm cynical about Burroughs sometimes because he's so capable of being cynical himself.
Yes.
I adore William Burroughs, but I don't
Yes.
take everything he says as complete gospel.
Well, he was a very troubled man, I know. But that's very interesting. Is it in one of his books?
I'm not sure. It's certainly on the record, the Dead City Radio. Dead City Radio is the version of it. Love Your Enemy. It's almost impossible to do because it goes against every basic
It does.
survival instinct that we have.
Well,
if you try, you can do it. and then it goes on like that. It's oozed down his throat and filling full of the love, the cum of it's great. It's fantastic.
We'll all try and find that.
I can't properly remember it. But
Yes, just a stick of Anton his throat, taste what he's been eating and blend it that in.
thank you. That is exactly what it is.
Yes.
So I love this idea of Sirius star system talking to us. That's one of the things about that. We also thought, and you've written about it and done on trying like. Have you personally ever felt that you've been spoken to by Sirius? If so, what would that be?
Well, I don't think anybody's actually spoken to by Sirius, because Sirius is a star, and I don't think I do believe that stars are probably conscious entities, including our sun, but I don't think that they bother with individuals that much. I think that there's more of a cosmic hierarchy, and that there are gradations of higher beings, and that and I feel that I have had some contact with some higher entities, but I surely wouldn't say that they're anything is like a sun or a star or a huge cosmic entity. They'd be higher than we are, and I think that there are many. And that's the other thing I would like to remind everybody of, as if we didn't know. There is basically a war going on that never ends, which is the war between good and evil. And so the only way we can win against evil, because evil does really exist. It's not merely the absence of good. It's a very active force. We can defeat it by the power of love, but that ain't easy, because we also have to take realistic steps, like when Hitler starts invading Britain, you have to shoot down his planes, don't you? So that's, I'm not saying pacifism is the answer. You can defend yourself with the righteous certainty that you're preventing evil from conquering you. That's different. Passive evil is the thing that we can have more effect on. But yes, I think that probably all of us are in touch with higher entities, and that would be our own higher selves. What do you think your intuition is? I'm not going to step off the curb because there's somebody coming. You've all got higher selves, and that in itself is a higher entity trying to whisper in your ear the whole time. Do listen. If you listen, you won't regret it.
I have found that with establishing contact with higher entities, because I started attempting it in the beginning of that year. Initially I was doing a ritual, it was described by Crowley, but it felt a bit awkward, so I just made up a ritual of my own, which worked a lot better. But I found that whatever this thing is, be it alien overlords, angels, whatever, at least for me, and based on what I know about Robert Anton Wilson's experience, a lot of the times where I've had such experience, which I would attribute to something like that, it would be finding myself in a situation that is very shocking on a lot of levels, on a lot of circuits, and sort of finding myself in the right place, in the right time, for a certain emotional reaction and psychological reaction to be triggered in me, which have led, I've had a few experiences like that, which have led to a process of re-imprinting and then profoundly changing some basic imprints that I had on the lower circuits and some higher circuit imprints that I had, for example, from a negative 7th circuit imprint, like, oh my god, what are these signs saying, what is happening to, positive superstition. And I have generally found that in a situation where one is experiencing this stage of high weirdness and extreme synchronicities, the most beneficial approach to tackling it is what me and my friend have been calling positive superstition, where absolutely everything, because reality is largely constructed based on the various goals that a person has. So a positive superstition approach to inhabiting a reality tunnel of high weirdness would be interpreting every single one of these events in the way that gives the largest amount of meaning leading into the fulfillment of the goal. So, for example, as the example of cosmic trigger was, when Robert Anton Wilson's daughter Luna dies, he's faced with the choice of liberally choosing between grief and staying in the same trip, or re-imprinting himself by a positive superstitious approach, which is, I was given this opportunity so that I could grow out of my fear and enter galactic love mode, etc. Well, I find it weird that they communicate with us through reality, through things that happen, that trigger us in certain ways.
Well, you should have been one of the speakers. That's very, very interesting. There are two basic things that you're saying. One is very, very important, that so much goes on behind the scenes that's invisible to us. And whenever synchronicities start getting denser and denser and denser, then there's a tremendous energy taking place. And you do have these moments when you're just right to move into another space and advance in your inner development. And that's good if you're on that track. But do be careful with rituals. I know that there are probably many people here at the moment who like rituals, but the thing is that invoking entities can be dangerous because they can often be bad ones.
I find that the best way to approach it is just to find one's own language. Like for me, I found that after experimenting with various ways to approach it, in English as my second language, the easiest one would be, "Oh, great magical universe, be very magical," without sending any specific intent, and that would just make things happen. And since it would be stripped of, it's a matter of unexpecting the expected. You just say, "Oh, great magical universe, be very magical," and then you leave a wide door open, while at the same time sending just the pure intention of...
Well, that general approach is better and safer, but you must at all times be careful to avoid trickery, because a lot of the bad entities will pretend to be good ones but aren't really. You just have to keep using your judgment the whole time. It's not an easy thing to do when you start mixing with the higher energies, but that's very interesting.
You were very careful to resist being defined as an astronomer of any kind, despite your worship of the Royal Astronomical Society. What definition of yourself would you accept?
Je n'existe pas. No, yes. I suppose I sort of sheepishly admit to being a historian of science, which means you can dabble in any aspect of science, and certainly including astronomy. I do a lot of work on ancient astronomy, and I've contributed twice to astrophysical journals. I'm a dabbler, you see. I'm always jumping around. I easily get bored, so all my books are on different subjects and so on, although they're all connected as well.
I just wanted to ask, because I don't know if you know that the Dogon priests, they came over to England recently, one of the young guys who received the lineage, and his dad died. And so there were quite a few people there, largely because of having, like myself, read your book and were interested in it. And he talked a lot about the Dogon beliefs of earth energy and things like that. And then someone asked a question about Sirius and the Dogon's communication Sirius. And he got really antsy, really didn't like the question. And then he sort of said, he felt it was a terrible insult to suggest that their knowledge had come from non-Earth-based or extraterrestrial sources, or other beings had to give it or whatever. And he said the reason he was touring was to kind of, in a way, set people straight. And so I just wondered if you had any contact with them, and if you knew why that, it was quite a surprising reaction, I think, for the people that were there.
Well, I did hear about this, too late to attend anything. I don't know who he is. but he's absolutely full of shit. Let me just give you, I hadn't intended to go into the Sirius mystery particularly, but I will have to just give you a little bit more information to address the point you've raised, which is so important. Marcel Griaule and Germaine Dieterlen were the two French anthropologists who, starting in 1931, began to do all these reports on the Dogon, and they spent many, many years there. Griaule was a very remarkable man who gained the confidence of the Dogon to such an extent that when he died in 1955, 250,000 inhabitants of Africa made their way on foot to his funeral in Mali to pay honor to this great spirit, as they considered him to be. Now, because Griaule had those remarkable asides to himself, that he had that kind of personality, he was able to gain the confidence of the very high priests of the Dogon, the main one of which was actually a woman, the high priestess of Amma, the name of their chief god. And there were 3 men priests. Those 4, if I were giving you a talk about Sirius, I would show you their photos. In fact, I did that last Saturday in London. And it's very important to know who they were. They have many different levels of initiation in the Dogon tribe, and this was the highest secret of their religion about Sirius, which they revealed to Griaule. Now, it is not foreigners, and certainly not myself, who have said that the Dogon got this information from other beings. It's the Dogon who say that. And that's why I say this man doesn't know what he's talking about and can't be genuine, because, in my opinion, because the fact is that it's meticulously recorded at great length that the Dogon themselves are the ones who maintain that all this information came to them from visiting beings from a planet in the system of the star Sirius. Didn't come to them in Mali, but came to their ancestors. And it's their own tradition. It's not something that's been cooked up by busybodies like myself or the anthropologists. And all those related tribes have the same tradition, not just the Dogon, but the Bozo, the Bambara, the Minyanka. They all have this tradition. And there's an iron statue of one of these visiting beings that's about 300 or 400 years old at least, that shows what they looked like. And then there are the many sand drawings. And so it's completely false of this person, and I'd dearly like to see his credentials and have him prove that he really is a Dogon priest, or if he is one, what kind of a Dogon priest, because he doesn't have the ring of authenticity to me at all. It's absolutely wrong of him to say that we've imposed this on the Dogon and it's an insult. It's the Dogon themselves whose own accounts have been faithfully recorded and reported. So it's the opposite of what that man says. So I wouldn't listen to him. I think maybe I ought to stop now, because there are lots more to come.